Jimmy Cyril to Neil Warnock to Jack Grealish. 3 spells at Notts County, which give our special guest, Mick Jones, a very unique perspective and insight into the Magpies. No fewer than 4 promotions as a player and assistant manager. An insight into what makes Neil Warnock so successful, how Jack Grealish arrived at Meadow Lane, or very nearly didn't, and tales of the great man himself, Jimmy Cyril, plus delivering strawberries from Sneinton Market to make ends meet in the early 1970s. A very warm Magpie Circle welcome to Mick Jones.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, delighted to have you on. So many.
It's a pleasure.
Hey,
pleasure to be here.
And the first thing we should say, delighted to see you looking so well, because you've been fighting one of your biggest battles recently, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah. Not something I'm over concerned about talking about, because I'm the type of guy, in every situation in life, I leave it to the experts because they always know better than you. And I rely on some fantastic medical people to keep me going, really. The interesting bit, and I won't bore you with any details, when it was first diagnosed, I was told I had 2 days to live.
Really?
Yeah. And then they got to work on me. And I think it's about 2.5 years later now, I'm still going well.
I didn't know that. 2 days. That
Yes.
Must have been a monumental shock to you.
Well, no, it wasn't really, because I was that confused and that ill that I didn't know what was going on. And obviously it all came about when I got to hospital, and one of the consultants said, that was the case. 24 hours, 48 hours maximum. But they got, anyway, they got to work on me and got me cracking again. And here I am.
Brilliant. Well, let's delve into a club that I know is very, very close to your heart. You do have a very unique perspective and have participated in the most successful 2 eras the club has had for the best part of the last 100 years. But I kind of want to just focus on your 3rd time at Notts, and in particular, your involvement with Jack Grealish. So our younger fans and followers, of course, Jack is one of the highest profile and best players in the country, playing for his country. You played a pretty pivotal role in getting him to play senior football for the first time. You were with Chris Kiwomya at Notts. Just give us a little bit of an insight and tell us what happened. How did you get Jack Grealish to Notts County?
Yeah, it's a good story, Paul. I went to watch Aston Villa reserves versus Norwich reserves when they were playing, for some reason, they were playing at Burton Albion's ground. And there was a lot of scouts there as normal. And after about half an hour, I'm thinking to myself, who is this kid? As you do when you've got a trained eye. And I thought, this lad looks interesting. But I was more interested in 2 other players in the Norwich team called the Murphy twins. And, what I did on purpose, which I had a habit of doing, if I saw a good player, you guarantee there's other scouts to be at the match. I always left very early. And whoever I passed, I'd say, nothing here tonight, lads. I'm off home. And on this occasion, I couldn't get Grealish out of my head. And so what? Next morning, couldn't wait for Chris to come in. And 1 minute, Paul. Anyway, I couldn't wait for Chris to get in. I says, Chris, I've seen a hell of a player. And I says, so-and-so Grealish. He said, he's too young, mate. He said, I don't want kids. I said, trust me. And he said, well, I don't think the hierarchy would let me sign him anyway. As it turned out, that is exactly what happened. And then I went back to Chris and I said, listen, Chris, if we don't sign him or can't sign him, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, what do you want me to do? there's no point in me going all over the country watching players for you and potential signings. And at that time, loans were very much Notts County saviour. And Chris says, well, you know, this is not me, Mick. This is the powers that be. I said, well, we need to speak to the powers that be, because if this is the road we're going to go down, I don't see me having any future in Notts County. The chairman, in fairness to him, come round to the idea, particularly when I said to him, listen, I've spoken to Gordon Cowans at Villa, and Gordon says, just sign him. If you can get him, sign him. And I spoke then to the chief exec, and he was brilliant. He said, well, listen, we think Jack needs to step up now. He's too good for the reserves, but he's not quite ready for the first team. And we did a deal whereby Notts County would only pay half of his wages, which weren't great at the time for a young boy. But if we didn't play him at any time, we had to pay twice the wages. And I just said, well, Chris, do it. Just do it. This kid will come into our team and he won't go out of it. Ironically, in the same week, I'd been to watch, or the following weekend, I went to watch Brentford versus Celtic in a pre-season friendly. And there were some good players on show. And I'm thinking to myself, driving home, I don't think if we struggle to sign one, I can't see us being allowed to sign two. Then I went to Chris on the Monday and said, Chris, any movement on Grealish? He says, yeah, I think the chairman's going to let us outdo it. I said, well, I'll tell you now, there's a kid at Celtic called McGregor. He's in the same league as Jack in terms of age, experience, but my contact at Celtic told me, similar to Villa, just get him. And I thought, Paul, there'd be no chance of us getting them. But again, the chairman supported us and let us get two of them together. And somebody once said to me, not so long ago, Jack Grealish was probably the best player to ever play for Notts County. And I thought, well, that's a sweeping statement, but I do know what he means because he's gone on to great things.
Did you see at that time, because I think you had a conversation with Gordon Cowans, didn't you, where he said he will play for England?
Yes, that was Gordon's statement, yeah. And when people like Cowans, who works every day with these players and brings them through, he can't be wrong, can he? He's not, he's not a supporter who sees them now and again. Gordon lives with them. And he said his temperament is fantastic. Now that is a big word in football, because if you haven't got a good temperament, you don't play many games. And that struck me, but it was Gordon himself that struck me more, because we're talking Gordon Cowans here, and we're also talking about a guy who lives with Jack Grealish every day of the week and all the other Villa players. So getting him could never be a gamble.
Okay, so you've seen both of them live performing. You get them on the training ground first morning. What do you think?
It was what the players thought, not me and Chris. To be fair to Chris Kiwomya, he had to back my judgment as well, because he hadn't seen Jack play. And when he turned up, I knew he was different. How he was different, whether it was his hair or the way he wore his socks and all the usual rubbish that goes with a modern day footballer. But the one thing you couldn't deny was unbelievable talent. And professional footballers, Paul, they spot it the moment you meet them with one training session. And I know this from my days of playing with people like David Needham and John Brindley. John Brindley was one of the best eyes I've ever known of a footballer. He could spot a player straight away. And in the same breath, the Notts County players were saying, who the hell is this lad? And Jack was so cocky about his ability. He had no doubt. And even in training sessions, he was the best player. He was the best trainer. He was the most dedicated. And I remember saying to the owner, this kid will play for England. And he said, it's a sweeping statement. I said, yeah, it is a sweeping statement, but I bet he does. And I'm glad for he's a fantastic boy.
What was he like as a lad? Because
great.
he's not moved far from Villa, but Callum's come down from Scotland. But these things can affect a player, can't they?
They can, yeah. But they were both McGregor and Jack were the same, really. Jack was more talented. McGregor had a great attitude, fantastic attitude. And I remember him running from box to box once and crossing a ball, and the whole of Meadow Lane erupted. And I'm thinking, that doesn't happen unless you're a good player. And of course, he's gone on to be captain of Scotland.
Yes,
you know, and I saw him play. It was Brentford. A lad in Scotland tipped me off, and I went down to watch this lad. And how Celtic were playing Brentford in a pre-season friendly, I don't know, but it was an opportunity for me to see him play. Oh, within half an hour, I knew. And I thought, I left early. I made sure every scout saw me leave at half time. And I was on the phone going back. And I spoke to a really good friend of mine, Ronnie Glavin, who ex-Celtic player and Barnsley, a great man. And I said, Ronnie, there's a kid at Celtic. And I told him, he says, I don't know him. He says, but give me half an hour. And he came back to me and he said, Mick, he's going to be a very, very good player. He says, but he's a bit too young for Notts County. I said, well, why do you say that? He says, well, they don't know about his temperament yet for the big, for a big game. I says, oh, I'll take that chance. Anyway, Ronnie rang his mate back and said, is there any chance Notts County could have him on loan? And within 5 hours or so, the word came back, they'd do it. And if you knew what I went through to get him at the club via the powers that be, it was unbelievable. I thought when they saw Grealish, they would say, well, if Mick Jones recommends a player, let's just do it. And I was so disappointed, the trouble we had to get Grealish and McGregor, sorry. And well, both of them, but the second one was harder because it's another signing and means more money. But nevertheless, I wasn't going to let go, to the point where I said to one of the, without naming names, I said to somebody, what have I come here for? What do you want from me? I'm all over the bloody country and you're not going to sign a player that I recommend. Then what am I doing? And actually the answer wasn't a very palatable one, but that's not the point, and hence I knew after the McGregor thing, I would eventually, fairly quickly, leave Notts County.
Okay. Before you did, you saw obviously a lot of Jack Grealish. You mentioned the other players saw it. We all know now how Jack plays. He draws fouls unbelievably. A lot of confidence, self-confidence as well.
Yeah.
Was he like that from day one?
Yeah. The moment he walked in, you could see it in him. Shoulders back, hair slick, loads of Vaseline on his head or something. And you just knew. He wasn't scared. He wasn't worried. He wasn't a young teenager looking at the older players thinking, what are they thinking of me? He'd come to play first team football. And I do know Gordon gave him a lot of advice before he came to Notts County. And just be yourself, obviously. But sitting down with Jack, he's a very, very shrewd boy. He's no mug. Intellectually, he's very sharp. He was accepted in the dressing room, not so much by his football, but by his personality. He wasn't a little boy coming into a big man's world and worried about how people would accept him. He was, this is me. And that's how the boy has developed his game, really. He's at the very top now and deserves, every time I see him play, I think about, that game against Norwich Reserves.
In training, because like you say, he's brave. Clearly, a lot of people are out to kick him. He took like a duck to water then when he's playing against 6'2", 6'3" people who want to leave a mark. Because Jack's always been on the edge, hasn't he? He always he draws a huge amount of fouls, doesn't he? You know,
yes,
he always gets up, doesn't he? He always gets up.
Yeah, he does it on purpose. He's clever. It's very, very hard to spot with Jack whether it was a foul or it wasn't a foul because of his timing. But he knew and he knows when to do it and where to do it, mainly in and around the penalty area.
And his dad used to come and watch him, didn't he, all the time? He used to come over to Notts, I know.
He did, yeah. Yeah, he did. And his dad had and has a big influence on Jack. And I didn't speak so many times. His dad he was always a guy who didn't want to be talking to people about his son. He always wanted to be in the background, watch his son play, stick him in the car and get him back to Birmingham. And but I believe in later years and now, his dad is a big influence.
And I am sure he appreciates the influence you played in picking him out from that game at Burton.
Yeah.
Let's move back a little bit,
yes.
A decade or two, to one of the two most successful eras in the club's history, the Neil Warnock era under Derek Pavis.
Yes.
And you know Neil better than 99.9% of all other people. I mean, there's a long list of clubs that you have been his assistant, starting at Notts, Huddersfield, Plymouth, Sheffield United, Crystal Palace, Queen's Park Rangers and Leeds. I probably missed a couple out. What makes Neil Warnock such a successful manager? To some people, he's the devil incarnate in the way he will be assumed to play. But everybody would love him to be manager of their club because they know he gets results.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Notts County fans will remember one thing. His enthusiasm for the game on the touchline is just incredible. His attitude towards football is incredible. And I was up in Middlesbrough about 10 days ago and spent 2 days with Neil on the training ground in the evening and talking football, and watching the players train, watching the players' attitudes towards training. And it brought me back to previous days with Neil, where I did all the work on the training ground until he wanted to take over. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. Most of the time, he did. But he'd watch me as well. And he would analyse me as well as the players. And he knew that I had this policy, Paul. If I'm going to be working for somebody, I'm not going to try and be that somebody. I do not want the manager's job. I don't want any publicity. I want everything done behind closed doors. And that's how we worked in all the clubs we were at. Neil would always ask me every day what we should do, what we shouldn't do, etc., etc., etc. And then he'd go out on the training ground and get to work. And I took on this idea that if I'm an assistant, I don't want to be the manager, because if you start going down that road, it's a delicate road to follow, I think, because you've got to be, I think you've got to be more in the background as a number two, but you miss nothing. Everything you do is for the manager. And I always had this belief that everything I saw, I'd report to the manager only if it did him good. If it did him any harm or made him angrier than he already is, I didn't do it. And that's how we got on with, such famously, really. I mean, even like I say, I was in Middlesbrough last week. We've had a great time together. And he's a unique man, Paul. In his 70s, he's got unbelievable enthusiasm for not just the game itself. Every day of the week, he's the most enthusiastic man you can meet.
I mean, you're both in your 70s. You both retain a huge enthusiasm. it's interesting. Some people will say Neil is not the greatest coach in the world, but is a great motivator, understands the game. What do you think are Neil's strengths as a manager? How does he get results?
Definitely motivation.
So well?
Definitely motivation. Definitely. Picking players right for him. I mean, he said to me once he was very lucky because when he walked into Notts County, there was some excellent players there, particularly Tommy Johnson and Mark Draper, who, you know, a blind man could say they were going to be top players and great personalities. And he wanted some steel, he wanted some power. And I remember us going to, I think it was Northwich, Barnet versus Northwich, on a tip from Barry Fry to come and watch two of my lads. And Derek Pavis on this day went with us, which was very unusual. And we went in Derek's Rolls Royce. We left with 20 minutes to go. And we're driving, and it was quite quiet in the car. And I'm thinking, maybe they don't fancy these two players. As it turned out, nobody wanted to speak first. And so then Derek says, go on then, what do you think? This is to me. He used to call me a clever something. That's what Derek, okay, clever, I can't say the second word. Okay, clever so-and-so. What do you think? I said, sign them both. Give off, he said. What? Both? I said, Derek, I signed them both. He says, well, now you've said that, I'm sure the manager's going to say the same. And Neil says, yeah, I think he's right. And it was hard work with Derek to get him to finally accept everything. Once he accepted everything, he would do it. And by the time we got to Nottingham, we'd agreed to sign both players, which we did.
Dave Regis.
That's right, yeah. And they were both fantastic lads. And as you remember, they had a great time at Notts County, those two. You know, there were two, what would I say, hard-boned, typical non-league players just waiting for a chance, waiting for somebody to spot them, really. And that was the day, you know, we happened to be there on a tip by Barry Fry to Neil. I've got two players here, and Neil told me, and we went, and that following Monday we signed them.
Notts County was where you and Neil got together.
Yes.
And I guess depending who you speak to, it was Neil's idea, or Derek, as in Derek Pavis, the chairman, might lay claim to sort of brokering the two of you together, correct?
I think there's a lot of it in that. Yeah. Derek wanted the assistant manager to be his choice. Neil wanted the assistant manager to be his choice.
Clearly.
So they actually had to please each other. Now, this is a good story. Neil came with, I was at Peterborough, and we'd beaten Ron Atkinson's team, West Brom, away from home on the Wednesday night. So it was a great performance. We were playing Scarborough on the Saturday, and I was worried sick about Scarborough for the simple reason our players were floating. They'd beaten a big team in the League Cup. And what happens to lower league players? They can't keep doing this mentally. That's why they're lower league players, basically. And I was worried sick, and rightfully so, because I knew of Neil's reputation and the way his teams played. They were hard to play against, they were good players, you know, very, very probably underrated, but very, in the professional game, never underrated. Well, would you believe they come and beat us? And I had this habit of finding out what a visiting manager's tipple would, you know, after a game, what they're like. So I was prepared, and, you know, gave them a drink. And I found out from a lad called Paul Evans that Neil Warnock liked brandy. And so I got him a very, very top brandy. And they'd come to London Road and beat us 2-0. But they were excellent. And I thought, they've read us inside out. We couldn't move unless there was a red shirt next to us. And after the game, I invited Neil and Paul Evans up for a drink, as you did in those days, and I'm assuming the same now. And I said, I've got something for you. And he said, what's that? I said, I believe you like a good brandy. He says, yeah. He said, well, I've got, try this. And it was a Cavossier or something. And he tried, he said, oh, Mick, that's fantastic. That's top class. And I said, well, I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Now, can you do me a favor? You've got your brandy, you've got your 3 points. Can you get off and leave me staff with me? And he said, yeah, we'll get off. And he says, I'll speak to you soon. But what he did on the way out, he picked the bottle up and took it with him. I thought I did say it was for you, but I didn't mean a lot. And I can hear him laughing and, rightfully so. He's just won. And going down the stairs with Evo, I can hear him laughing now. When we got together to talk about the job, he said to me, we didn't know each other very well. That's the first thing. But he needed somebody who had experience of the leagues and all the usual stuff that is relevant. He says, but I think we could work together. I said, what do you base that on? He says, our conversation in your office when we come and beat you. And I could hardly remember the conversation. And he says, but the only problem is, he says, the chairman. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, he wants to meet you and talk to you. And I said, well, that's no problem to me. I said, I don't know Derek personally, but I know about him a lot. And so Neil said, well, that don't bother you. I said, no. I says, so I did meet Derek, and it was quite interesting because Derek said it was him who recommended Mick Jones to Neil. But Neil says it was Neil Warnock who recommended Mick Jones to Derek. And knowing the conversation between the two, every decision that was made at Notts County was like that. It was never smooth. It was never even. It was always everything. And something you'd do in 5 minutes took 3 weeks with them two together. And it was an interesting combination because both of them were similar, big personalities, loved life, loved the game. And Derek could never get on top of me. And I made that clear from the first away trip when he asked me to get him a gin and tonic. I says, Derek, I've come as your coach. I haven't come as your waiter. Get it yourself. Then I turned around and laughed at him, and I went and got him a gin and tonic. But I'd made my point, and he was fine. Derek was fine with me.
What was Derek like as a chairman? Because he was an archetypal, stereotypical image of a chairman, wasn't he? Cigar, fedora, sheepskin coats. Loved that kind of life, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And you would have known of him because he was obviously a Nottingham businessman working his way up when you were around playing for Notts in the 70s.
Well, I'd met Derek when he was chairman of Nottingham Forest. And, I didn't know him. I was in the company of him and Fred Reacher. And I knew Fred, but I didn't know Derek. And I thought he looked and sounded like a powerful man. And I think he enjoyed the power of being at Forest and on the board and all that type of thing. Although he couldn't tolerate Cloughie, apparently. I don't know why. But Derek was great with me. And he always made a point that if it wasn't for him, I would not be working with Neil. He was the one who suggested it, and he was the one who sanctioned it. And to this day, bless him, I still don't know the answer.
When I interviewed Derek, as I did you for my book, here it is. 600 odd pages for it. Derek said to me that Neil was the best manager he ever appointed. And try as he might, he couldn't get anyone. I think remotely would be an exaggeration. He did appoint Sam Allardyce, but he did say to me that Neil was by far head and shoulders his best appointment. And having made that appointment in succession to John Barmore, it could never find another one.
Mm-hmm.
It could never find another as good appointment. But I think it's fair to say, like you said, two strong characters. But I think you've said to me before, one of Neil's strengths, apart from his motivation, is being able to manage people, manage players, but manage upwards as well in terms of his relationships with chairman, owners.
Yeah. It's sorry, Paul.
So go on. So talk about that dynamic with Derek.
I think that's vital anyway. In any football club, the manager and chairman is vital. If that doesn't work, the club isn't going to work. That's a certainty. Derek thought Neil was a tinker. Neil thought Derek was a tinker, and they both were. And they were both big personalities. And but the one thing they had in common, apart from these great two personalities together, they both were desperate for success. And when I went in with Neil, it took me maybe a week, maybe not that, to recognise this club's going somewhere. Mainly because of the playing staff, because some terrific players when you look back. And I always look back to that time when I look at, Craig Short and Yatesy and people like that, Tommy Johnson, Mark Draper, then of course the players we brought in. It was just coming together beautifully. And Neil, being a great man manager, he could gel those personalities and turn them into better players. He definitely should take all the credit for Tommy Johnson and Mark Draper, because he improved those two boys. Even though Tommy used to come to me as a fellow lad from the Northeast and ask me things, it was always, what does the gaffer want? What does the gaffer want from me? And I would tell Tommy a straight answer, oh, okay, I'll do it, Mick. Now, those type of things create bonds between me and Tommy and Craig Short, who was a little bit insecure at the time. Those type of lads that would come to me and chat, but I would always tell the manager, I wouldn't want any kudos behind the door. I didn't want to know about it. But the manager must know, if I'm talking to a player, the manager's got to know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, sometimes by wanting to be a good assistant, you can let the manager down at times. And once that happens, you're in deep waters.
Playoffs. It frustrates me a little bit when I hear a lot of people say playoffs, it's all a lottery. Yeah, it's all a lottery. Best team don't necessarily win. And I think as soon as you start talking like that, you almost give players excuses to not succeed, because it's a lottery. It don't matter win or lose. It's not really down to ability. I suspect Neil would take a different take on that. What did he have? Because not just at Notts, his playoff record is absolutely remarkable.
Yes, sir.
It's a glib question to say, what's the secret? But why do you think at least Neil was always so competitive in playoffs and managed to get performances out of his players and his teams in those pressure cooker games?
Now, that's an interesting comment you just made. They are pressure cooker games. I've never come across a manager so good at taking the pressure off the players. He was brilliant at it. We used to go to the Belfry and play golf. He let the lads go to the nightclub at the Belfry on a
Bel Air.
Yeah, the Bel Air, that was it. And he let them have a few drinks at the right time of the week. Neil was unbelievably professional, actually, on these things. But on the right night, which would probably be a Wednesday in this case, before Wembley, every player went to the nightclub. And if they didn't, they got a fine. And if he found out, about this, if somebody wasn't there, he would also find the roommate. And things like that just build up a great rapport between the players and the manager. And he took all the pressure off the players. And going into Wembley and all these places, big stadiums and all that, Neil made them feel great, as if Notts County belonged at Wembley. Wembley was for Notts County. It wasn't for the opposition. It was for Notts County. And he relaxed everybody. I'll tell you a cracking story. I can't remember which final it was, but Neil said to me, I want you to show the players. I think it was Brighton. Was it Brighton then?
I think it was Brighton. It's the Chubby Brown, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. That was
right.
it. Yeah. That was it. It was a Brighton game. Yeah. And he says, how do you think the lads are? So they're relaxed. They're good. They're in good nick. He said, I want you to show them this video of the opposition. It says it's only 5 minutes. He says, but I want them to be aware of what's on the video. So I got Phil Turner, and I said, Phil, here's a video. The manager wants you and the lads at lunchtime to look at it. It's only 10 or 15 minutes. Nothing, it's not going to be that intrusive, but he needs you to look at it. Phil Turner said to me, is he going crack? I said, what? So, what do you mean? He said, video. He said, Mick, give me the video. I'll sort it out. But I could tell Phil didn't want to do it. Then, of course, I found out that Phil didn't put the Brighton or whatever it was video on the screen. It was Chubby Brown. And I left the room and came back, and I said, right, Phil, everything all right? He said, yeah, fine. Everybody's ready, Mick. I said, what do you think of the video? He said, what video? And I said, the video I gave you. Oh, no. He says, we watched Chubby Brown. So I think, right. So about 5 minutes later, Neil comes across, did the lads watch the video? I said, yeah. What do they think? He said, oh, it was brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, fine. Everything's fine. Of course, as you know, we played brilliantly. and Neil didn't know. He thought the lads had watched the football video, and we're watching Chubby Brown. And when I told him after the game, typical Neil, he said to me, he said to me, that's why you're my assistant. He says, other assistants would allow that. They'd be scared. I said, Neil, Phil Turner gave me so much confidence by that comment. He said, no, we'll watch Chubby Brown. We're not watching a football video. That instilled in me, as their coach and assistant, so much confidence. And they just went out, as you know, that day they were brilliant. And the characters, when I look back now, Neil didn't only sign good players, he signed big characters. And when you put a load of big characters in one dressing room, you end up with maybe a Liverpool or something like that. But those boys, when I look back, even young Chris Short, who came into the scene, I knew young Chris was going to be a good player. His attitude was amazing. And Neil would sign that kind of player. He didn't like superstars. He didn't want players who had been good players and then dropping down for a few quid. It was the other way around. He liked nuggets. And it's like when we signed Paul Harding. One of my scouts in Nuneaton rang me and said, Mick, there's a lad playing for Barnet. I think it was Barnet, wasn't it? And yeah. And he said, they're playing West Midlands Police on Wednesday night. I think you're going to go. So I'm talking to Neil. I says, I've got to go. I said, I'm going to West Midlands Police. And he said, where's that? I said, I don't know. I'm just meeting a bloke in Nuneaton. And he said, tell you what, I'll come with you. I said, no, you need Wednesday night off. You need Wednesday with the family. No, I'll come with you. And as we're going over in the car, we're talking about the player and who's spotted him. One of our scouts, one of my scouts actually, a lad called Cliff Morris, who played for Bristol City, who's very poorly now. But Cliff rang me and said, I've seen a play, and Anyway, we went over, but being a non-league ground, Neil Warnock couldn't get away with walking in and not getting spotted. So he said, well, we'll not go in together, pay to go in. He says, I'll meet you behind the trainer's bench on the halfway line. So that's what we did. We both paid to go in on different turnstiles and then walked around, and I could hear the rumbling. Neil Warnock's here. Neil Warnock's here. It was going around the ground, Paul, within 20 minutes, he come to me, he says, do you want to go home? And I said, what do you mean? Go home? I said, don't you like him? He says, we're signing him tomorrow. So we went home. After 20 minutes, we went home. And we signed the lad. And this is typical, that's a typical Warnock. He's got a keen eye for what he wants. Not particularly what other clubs want for their team, for what he needed for his team. And, I would have thought Paul Harding as well and David Regis were two of the best non-league signings ever in the history of Notts County.
I tell you, an influential position, wherever Neil has been, goalkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I believe Steve Cherry was Neil's actual first signing.
Yes.
And of course, there is some history with Notts. He was he grew up in a Notts County supporting family.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was presented with medals by Tommy Lawton when he was a kid. That was arguably one of his very best signings, wasn't it? And a statement of intent and his ability in the transfer market from a very, I'm sure that was his first signing.
Yeah. Yes.
And Ches was a strong character, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, Ches was obviously there when I got there.
Yes.
And I soon found out about Steve Cherry. He wasn't interested in the other players on a training day. It was about him and the club apprentices putting balls out for him, cones out for him. All the kids crossing balls, shooting. He did his own sessions. We did have Paul Evans, a good friend of Neil's, great lad, Paul Evans. And Evo would join in, but he said to me, I'd walk out onto Meadow Lane. How's it going, Paul? He said, it's up to him what he wants. I just let him do it. Steve Cherry knew exactly what he needed and what he wanted. So Paul didn't, all that Paul had to do was give him what he wanted, really. He didn't have to be a good goalkeeping coach. Steve knew exactly what made him a good player. And all I thought about Steve Cherry was, Steve, clean sheets are like gold dust. I says, and if you get as many as you can, we win championships. Things like that. And so me and Steve used to have this thing about clean sheets. And that's what we talk about. But I can't remember Neil Warnock ever telling Steve Cherry what to do. In any situation, he just let him get on with it. And he was a big character, vocal, knew his job, angles and that type of thing, very, very good. Crosses good. His reflexes were amazing. And as you remember, we built a team on clean sheets after that because, Shorty and the back four, everything gelled. Things to Charlie Palmer. Charlie was a unique man. He loved Steve Cherry, loved him. And what you can probably gauge now as I'm talking to you, Paul, the team was coming together with great camaraderie. Neil loved characters, and he's a character himself, obviously. Big character. Neil's a big character. Neil is very comfortable in the company of, say, Sir Alex Ferguson or people like that ilk. Neil's very comfortable. He believes in himself, and obviously his career has proven over that many years. And in his 70s, and I was up with him in Middlesbrough 2 weeks ago. He's got the same enthusiasm for the game, exactly the same.
You get to the promised land. We've mentioned the victory over Brighton. When you look back on that season, with the money that you were allowed to be able to spend, do you think there was a realistic chance of staying up? Or do you think it was always potentially going to be just that one step too far?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the excitement of being in the Premiership. I know it wasn't the Premiership then, but it is now.
Yeah.
Top flight, yeah. And it was off. It was the excitement of going to places like White Hart Lane and Old Trafford.
Manchester United first game away, wasn't it?
yeah. I thought that was cruel to do that. And I think if that's the same game, Neil Warnock, you talk about master strokes, they battered us, Man United. And the top players were on form, Their best players were incredible on that day.
Yeah.
And as we're coming off, I'm coming down the stairs because, I used to sit out of the way and I didn't like being on the bench. Anyway, we're going to the tunnel. Craig Shaw says, Mick, is it like that every week? I said, yep, every week. And even Mark Hughes, who gave him a torrid time, but in fairness, Shorty stood up to it. And we're talking about Mark Hughes. And I said, Shorty, in time, this will make you a better player. If you can handle Mark Hughes, you're going to be a top player. He said, oh my God, he said, it's the hardest game I've ever played in my life. But then, as you remember, I think we played Alan Paris at left back,
yeah,
which is the most cruelest thing you could ever do to a footballer. Poor Alan came off. He was wrecked. He'd been overrun and he was distraught.
This was the unknown Russian winger, Andrei Kanchelskis, making his English debut, and no one had a clue who he was.
Well, I got the biggest rollicking of my life. Neil said to me, have you got the team sheet? He says, who's this? I said, I don't know. He said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, it's your job to know. And I thought, I don't know. He said, well, you better find out. Anyway, the people I asked, stewards and people around me in the corridors, they didn't know who he was. So I had no chance. And I went back in and I said, Neil, nobody knows who he is. He said, well, this is hopeless, this. He said, we're sending my lads out there and nobody's got a clue. But that's when Alan Paris played left back. Well, he ran Alan into the ground, bless him. And we got well beaten, obviously. And it was a massive shock to the players. Neil Warnock came in the dressing room. I'll never forget this as long as I live. And I'm thinking, please don't criticise the players. And he walked in, and everybody sat down. He says, lads, I've been looking at the game today. If we weren't as good as we are, we'd have lost 10 today. He said, you were magnificent. And walked out. And I thought, masterstroke. Because the players are so down and shell-shocked, he could have put them even further down if he explained everything that was inside him at that particular time with adrenaline still going and anger flowing, in which happens to all managers. He had the brain power to think, right, I need to help these lads. And it was a masterstroke because he took all the pressure off the players and put it on himself. And I thought that was brilliant because he could have easily criticised Craig Short for not being able to handle Mark Hughes. Well, there's great centre-halves that never handled Mark Hughes. And Short, he was just a young lad coming through, really. But it was that day, I always remember that. And I thought, Neil, that is class. Because the players suddenly felt good again. If he'd have hit them with criticism, they've just been battered. The last thing they needed was criticism. And Neil was brilliant. He was brilliant that day, Neil Warnock. And of course, maybe the big league was too big for us at that particular time. I remember going to Liverpool and trying to man-mark Jan Molby. I've spoken to Jan's son about this, actually. Couldn't get the ball off him. Nobody could get the ball off Jan Molby. And I think it was Phil Turner was designated to follow him around and all that. And half time, Neil was having a bit of a go. He says, Gaffer, I'm doing my best. I can't get near him. And Neil thought, well, there's no, that's it. That's the answer. Can't get near him. He was that good. But we didn't have, well, let's call it Premiership. We didn't have Premiership players, but we had Premiership honesty in the dressing room. And it was a brilliant dressing room. Johnson and Draper, I used to love the dressing room when those two were on form. They were the funniest guys. Football was a hobby. You know, they loved football, loved training. Then you bring the others around, Craig Short, Chris Short. I'll tell you a great story about Chris Short. Now, this was the Meadow Lane game. I think we drew. We did. We drew at Meadow Lane. And we said to Chris Short, listen, we want you to mark Ryan Giggs the whole 90 minutes. Forget the game, forget the ball, forget everything. Stand next to him so he can't get the ball. He said, because if he gets the ball, he'll have you on toast. And as you know, we drew the game at Meadow Lane. And it was a great result, really, when you consider the gap between the two squads. And I went up to Shorty and I said, Chris, I saw you go to Ryan Giggs at the end of the game. What did you say? Oh, what did he say to you? He said, Shorty, what do you want? Shorty said, what do you mean? He said, you must want something. You've not left me all afternoon. And he stood man for man next to him all afternoon. So we eliminated Ryan Giggs. I know, and that got us the point. Now, afterwards, Ike Ferguson came in and had his usual glass of wine and said, you lads should take a lot of credit today. He says, your tactics were spot on. He says, because Ryan Giggs is in the best form of his life. And you've stopped 30% of my team by stopping him. He said, well done, lads. Had his drink and went. And Neil looked at me and said, that's some compliment, mate. I says, I know. But it was typical of Notts County then. The players believed in everything. Everything we said, the players believed and carried it out. And on that particular day, Chris Short really was brilliant, yet hardly kicked the ball. So tactically, Neil was spot on there.
Neil's come into Notts, joined by yourself. Total success, 2 playoffs, winning a lot more games than losing. He'd had a cup run against Tottenham.
Mm-hmm.
He had a few cup runs.
That was another one.
Yeah.
That was another one. Paul Gascoigne and Paul Harding. Oh, my word. I think Paul Harding thought we were playing rugby.
Yeah, he got away with it, didn't he, Gaza?
He did. Yeah.
How did everyone take relegation?
Well, we saw it coming, that's for sure. Neil took it the worst. Well, actually, Derek took it the worst. But the second worst was Neil. It hit him hard. And I felt a divide growing between Derek and Neil because of defeat and because of going down. And, Derek, I think Derek was a great chairman, but he could be hypercritical at times. And I used to say to him, Derek, why do you talk like that? You're an amateur. And he took it all. He wouldn't take it from many people. He'd take it from me. I said, why do amateurs comment on professional sports and things like, I said, it doesn't work that. I said, you are supportive. I said, but you're also critical. I said, and sometimes your criticism hits you harder than the support. And like I say, me and Derek we didn't have a love. I think it was a very respectful relationship between the two of us. He knew I wasn't going to take any rubbish from a chairman. And I always said, amateurs should stay no matter what occupation you are. If you're an amateur, keep your nose out of professional sport. And I've always believed that, and I still believe to this day. Derek had a habit of thinking he knew the game. And I used to say, that's a dangerous thing, Derek, when you're an amateur. And that's how Derek was. And that amateurish approach or attitude split Neil and Derek in the end. And I couldn't believe that Neil Warnock was going to get the sack. And he did get the sack, and I couldn't believe it. But in hindsight, and when I say hindsight after about 3 weeks, I soon worked it out that it wasn't only Derek behind Neil's sacking, it was a host of criticism and people getting into Derek, you know. And also this myth about, well, we don't play enough football. Well, maybe that's true, I don't know. But the bottom line is you have to win football matches. On the way up, we're winning football matches. As soon as we start losing, this is when the criticism comes in and people make rash decisions, and that's what happened. I don't think for a long time Derek really didn't get over that decision, you know. I mean, okay, Big Sam came in and Sam's fantastic. So I knew Sam would turn things around, but my memory sticks with the day we got the sack. And then I think it was my idea or Neil's idea, but the Nottingham Evening Post rang and said, would you mind having a picture, you and Mick? And Neil said, what do you think? I said, well, why not? We're going anywhere, so won't do any harm. And we got a bottle of champagne and we poured champagne. And the picture in the Evening Post, it'll still stand up today somewhere.
Yeah, I've got it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And me and Neil drinking champagne. And what we were doing, I said, Neil, don't say anything wrong about Notts County. Although there wasn't much to say wrong about Notts County. I said, let's show that we are celebrating what we've done at Notts County. He said, Mick, masterstroke. And that's what happened.
See, I can remember it quite vividly. There was relegation. So then you're starting off again. And it was Sunderland in the FA Cup.
That's right.
Replay. It was certainly a midweek game.
Yeah.
And it didn't really go according to plan. You got beat. And I can remember I was stood in the crowd somewhere. And they were booing, Warnock out, all that. And I liken it to when I was at Leicester and Martin O'Neill had a really torrid time in his first 3 months there. Couldn't win a game.
Yeah. And
he got pelters from the crowd. Absolute pelters. Yeah. But he hung in there. The club didn't get rid. He got them promoted at the end of the season. And he then proceeded to remind fans of that for the next 4.5 years while he was winning things. Mm-hmm. And I was in that crowd when there were thousands of Leicester fans, you know, get out O'Neill, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
You know, after about 1.5 years, not one Leicester City fan would admit to having chanted O'Neill out, despite the fact there were thousands in the crowd. You couldn't find one.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same with Neil, because there was a few chanting it that night, that Sunderland game. Everyone now, oh no, I didn't want Neil to go. You know, oh no, I never shouted anything. I never did this. I never that. And it's kind of, you know, as fans, we sometimes have to bear the brunt, because if you're not chanting from because chairmen do get influenced by other people, don't they? Chairmen,
absolutely.
Because they all want to court to an extent some level of popularity, don't they? That's what they do. Yeah. There's a lot of ego in this. Yeah. Was Neil surprised? Were you surprised when the axe fell after that game? Or did you kind of almost thought it was coming?
Well, it was my team, Sunderland. So
yeah, Sunderland boy.
So you can imagine, can't you? And no, it was a big shock. But
how was the news broken to you? How was the news broken to you?
By Derek. Phoned me. He wanted to meet, and I said, "We don't have to meet. I know what's coming, Derek." He said, "I'm so sorry." I found out later that he was influenced by another director and people close to the boardroom. That, you know, Warnock, you've got to make a decision, Derek. I know from his son, who passed away, Michael, great lad, fantastic person. Michael told me that his dad didn't want to sack me. But the pressure from everybody else around Derek was getting on top of him, and he just caved into it. And Michael told his dad, "You just made a mistake." And I know Michael and Derek, his dad, did fall out over this a little while. Pray God they got together again. But Michael was a strong man, and he was a good director. Michael, great, and Derek didn't want to do it. Tell you that now, Paul. Didn't want to do it. It'd be, if Derek was alive now and asked him what's the hardest thing that you've ever done in your life, it would be to sack Neil Warnock.
How did Neil take it?
Shocked until I said to him, "Hey, do you realise what we've done here? This is not about one game, this." I said, what you should do is get this is true. Get the post in, the Evening Post.
Yeah, you're saying.
And get the champagne out. And let's have a picture of us two celebrating the success of Notts County, not the sack.
Yeah.
And Neil said to me to this day, masterstroke. Because there's no point in being bitter. When you get the sack, you get the sack. Being bitter doesn't help anybody in anything in life. But I just felt that, something, what we've achieved here is really amazing. I mean, with the greatest respect, Notts County is not Aston Villa or Birmingham City or all provincial clubs. Notts County is always a small club in terms of population. It's split in one city. So it's hard to be, you're never going to get 50,000 into Meadow Lane. That's the point I'm making. And because of that, maybe people, once they get success, get above the station a little bit and think, well, we've arrived now. But clubs will always, Jimmy Cyril used to say, clubs will always revert to type. And by and large, Jimmy's right. And he'd say, you're only as big as your population. And again, the biggest population of the football fraternity was Nottingham Forest at the time. And we got, obviously, the thing with Notts County, Paul, is if Notts County are Notts County, a supporter, and Notts County, you'll know this better than me. A Notts County support, I know it'll relate to other clubs, but I'm not interested in that. A Notts County supporter will be born. And the first thing they'll do, the parents will give them a shirt like yours, and they'll put it on the baby. And that kid will be a Notts County supporter even before they can crawl. And that's how Notts County is made up. Now, Derek was different. Derek came as a Forest man.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do. But he was determined to get success. And it was, I said to Derek, this is the saddest day of your life, not mine. I said, I'll go somewhere and work. I said, but I think you've made the biggest mistake. And whether that was true or not, I never really thought too much about it, because Notts County have had, good times and, bad times as well. But the overriding thing for me was we shouldn't have had the sack then. I'm not saying we shouldn't have had the sack. I think Derek gave in to the pressure. And in the end, he just pulled the trigger.
Okay, that brings a close to kind of your middle stint at Notts. Let's go back to the first. And probably one of the most formative ones for you, because you're a younger man. You are at Notts County in the 70s. You got 2 promotions as an assistant to Neil. You got 2 promotions playing under Jimmy Cyril in a vastly different time. You used to work part-time in the markets on Sneinton Market in the summer, along with people like Don Masson. So this wasn't just the average players; these were the best players as well. What was that era like for you as a player, playing for Notts, when you're winning most games? compare and contrast for me, Jimmy Cyril the man to Jimmy Cyril the manager. What was that era like for you?
Well, I was a bit unlucky because when I was signed from Derby, I dislocated my ankle. When Jimmy came into the club, I was still injured. Most managers don't like injured players around them, and I understood that because you're no good to them. So Jimmy didn't really know me as a player, or he just knew me as an injured bloke walking around with crutches and chalk on his leg. But me being me, I had to prove to Jimmy that I was good enough for him, not the other way around. And I can't remember whether we'd had a bad run or Jimmy had a bad run, I'm not sure, but I remember Jimmy not being happy with something, and he wanted 11 aside on the training ground. And obviously I'd recovered from my injury, and I played in the Central, the Reserve League.
North Midlands League.
The night before, and I had a blinder. And next day, went to training, and we had a practice match on Meadow Lane. And a lad called Oakes was in the team.
Yes.
And Jimmy kept stopping the game, and he's working on pressure. Well, that was probably my biggest quality, was going and getting the ball and winning it and giving it to Masson and things like that. And I was wrong, but I knew Dennis Oakes was having a bit of a hard time, and I knew if I do well today, Jimmy's going to play me Saturday. And I was on the other side, so Oakes was in the first team, as would be the team on Saturday. And I went into a few tackles wrongly, because I thought, well, if I impress Jimmy today with tackling and running and all that, he's got to pick me, because Dennis wasn't having the best of times. And that's exactly what happened. I rattled Dennis a few times to the point he said something to me in front of Jimmy that, what the hell is going on here? This is a practice match, this is not the real thing. But for me, it was a turning point with me and Jimmy. I don't think Jimmy knew me that well. I don't think he trusted me that well. I don't think he particularly liked me, to be honest with you. But that wasn't the point. And he picked me for the Saturday. And I never came out of the team from then the rest of the season. And Jimmy liked what I did. He used to call me a hustler. And I'd go and get the ball and then give it to Masson or Crickmore or Nixon. And as Jimmy used to say, give it to the people who can play. One of the words I couldn't. And he might be right, to be fair. So me and Jimmy had a love-hate relationship, really, but a good relationship. I remember we went to Bolton Wanderers and Peter Reid played, and Jimmy came in and said, listen, Michael, he said, he always called me Michael. Michael, they've got to play here, they'll play for England. You man mark him for 90 minutes and we win. And that's exactly what happened. And I remember Sam Allardyce played for Bolton Wanderers at that particular game. Well, we were good that day. But I marked Peter Reid out of the game. To the point, Peter turned to me once and said, what do you want? I was that close to him. I said, I'm only doing what I'm told. So anyway, we won. And Ian Greaves was the manager of Bolton. And George Mulhall was his number 2. As we were walking off, George Mulhall said, you were brilliant today, son. Nobody's done that to Peter Reid. Oh, that's nice. Gets in the dressing room. Jimmy is full of it. He's full of, Haitley, Masson, dream, it's only a dream. Don, this is only a dream. Chatting away, he looks at me. He says, Michael's son, he said, you were fantastic today. I said, Gaffer, I've not touched the ball. He said, well, that's why you were fantastic. And I thought, something, he can't even in my best game for Notts County, you can't even compliment me. And we had that relationship, me and Jimmy. He knew I was a strong character. He knew I wouldn't lie down to him, But I'd respect him, obviously, and he demanded respect for what he did in the game. And I loved his training. But he never had this love of me. I never got an equal return from Jimmy. You know.
Now, so you're in the middle of the park. You're doing the dirty, the scruffy stuff, the hustling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And kind of one of the main benefactors from that was Don Masson, who was kind of the jewel in the crown.
Yeah.
We all know now Don, a very changed man from his playing days. Wonderful man now. Don didn't necessarily thank you a great deal for the graft that you put in, did he?
He does now.
Yeah, but he didn't then.
No, he didn't. And Don was wrong, no doubt about it, because he got me to a state where I started to become nervous. Because he used to say, "You can't play, give me the ball." And I remember once on the field, I nearly hit him on the field. I was that thankfully I didn't. I was that incensed by Don's comments, you know, just give me the ball because you're not good enough to have the ball. And things like that. Well, he was probably right, but it doesn't do your confidence much good as well. Having said that, Don Masson was the best professional footballer probably I've ever come across in terms of his own dedication to his own job. Don didn't worry about the team and all that type of thing, but to watch Don Masson work on the training ground, it was a masterclass. Don had so much pride in himself that he knew he had to be the fittest. He trained harder than anybody. He worked harder than anybody. Every day was a hard day for Don. Even Friday mornings, I can see him now, Paul, at the end of Meadow Lane, on just off the pitch. Much to Peter Thompson, the groundsman's annoyance, he put all these cones down, and he'd do sprints, and they would get shorter and shorter and shorter. Then they get longer. He'd spend at least half an hour on a Friday morning or the day before a game doing this. He'd leave the track in a right mess. And I remember once thinking, well, you know something, I don't even like you, but I've got to admire you. And it was because of that. He was an unbelievable professional, Don Masson. Not a nice person until now. And as you probably know, the times I meet Don, he always apologizes to me. I said, Don, it's 100 years ago. What are you talking about? You know? And he'd say, oh, Michael, he called me Michael. Oh, Michael, he said, I was a disgrace. I said, yeah, you were. You were a disgrace, but you're a great player. And he was a great player, Masson. There's no doubt about that.
You got 2 promotions. I'm guessing another thing that, although you've just said that about Don, Jimmy, despite Don being an individual, the rest of you had a great camaraderie, didn't you? I think Les Brad sums it up. He said, the other 12, 13, found a way to keep Don in the loop, but everyone else, and you would always run through a brick wall for each other.
Yeah. I think it's because of the personalities of the players. I mean, Arthur Mann was Don's best mate. I didn't like him. He was his mate. And Don was like a little boy who you take his lollipop out of his mouth, or he's playing football, you take the ball away. That was Don. He was like a spoiled child, Don. But I always say to people, Don Masson, in terms of ability and professionalism and attitude, was probably the best player I've ever played with. And in the big picture, well, that's about right, because that's what you want from players. Don, we still laugh about it now. He said, always apologizes to me. He said he was a disgrace. And some of the things he said to me were disgraceful. But I was big enough to think, well, you know, I'm in the team and I'm still getting paid every week. So what's your problem? And of course, in latter years, when we meet, we're like brothers. Long-lost brothers.
Right, you've led me on to one. I'll give another plug for my book, 650 pages. One of my most favourite and funniest stories in the book is one that you recount, and it concerns your contractual discussions with Jack, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which just to me sums up Jack's negotiating skills.
Yes.
So you've had enough. You know, 2 or 3 players get all the money, right? And so you have a meeting. You're the shop steward.
That's right.
And you decide, right, not going to let Jack get away with it this year. Yeah. So in you go. What happens next then? Remind me of your opening gambit to Jack when you are arguing for a pay rise.
Well, before that, Stubbsy, Brindley, Worthington, lads like that, they were good players, but, you know, although Stubbsy should have got a lot further in the game than he did, because Brian didn't even like football. It's a strange thing to say, but he preferred darts and dominoes at his pub in Keyworth. And that's Stubbsy, you know. But we had a little mini committee. We knew Brad, Haitley, Masson would get all the money. We knew that. The others would get what's left in the pool. And we might be 20 quid each, worse off or better off. But we knew where the money was going, and rightfully so, because these are the guys who win games. And I went in to see Jack Dunnett, and this was all planned. Bill had organised his story, what he was going to say and all this. And I walked in, and he made me this offer. And I said, Mr. Dunnett, with the greatest respect to you, I said, I think that's an insult. He said, why? I said, well, there's players here, you know, getting a lot more than that. And Jack Dunnett said, yeah, but they're a lot better than you. Well, they were really, so what could I say? And I said, yeah, but my brother and my family, my brother's dead, yeah. My dad goes down the pit, my brother goes, you know, down the pit, one of the shipyards and all this. And I said, you know, how can it be right? A player, a person goes down the pit, and I'm a professional footballer, and he gets more money than me. He said, well, go and work down the pit. I thought, yeah, you're a top politician, you. And that was it. That was it. In fairness to Jack actually got, when I was really keen to be a manager, Jack got me the Kettering job. And when Jimmy came back, Ronnie Fenton got the sack unfairly, but in fairness, he only got the sack because Jimmy was available.
Yes.
Jimmy got the sack at Sheffield United, still living in Burton Joyce and all that.
Yeah.
You know, it's too daft for words. Nobody was going to cry if Jimmy Cyril was coming back to that county anyway. So Ronnie didn't have a leg to stand on. And so you might remember this better than me. Us and the press met at the Nottingham night that night, and about Ronnie's being sacked, and all get together, and you know, press were fantastic actually. And I announced that night that I was going to resign with Ronnie. And I remember Colin Slater actually said, "Don't do that. You should never do that. Let them make the first move." So anyway, I thought about what Colin said, and I thought, you know something, I can't live with myself. Ron's had the sack, I'm part of it, I'm his number 2. So how do I survive? So I went to see Jimmy, and Jimmy asked me to stay. And I thought, well, I'd not even thought about Jimmy at the time. I was thinking about my own future, and you know, and then he said, well, I'd like you to stay. I said, well, what capacity? He said, well, I don't know yet. And that, when Jimmy said that, I thought, no, I'm not going to go beyond the training ground, picking balls and bibs up and tie-ups and all that. That's not me. And Jimmy knew that. I think Jimmy, it was a back-ended thing that you can stay if you want. I went to see Jack Dunnett, and Jack said to me, you do know Jimmy wants you to stay? I said, yeah. I said, but Ronnie's had the sack, and I'm his number 2. So how can I survive? I said, it's not right. I said, so I'd like to leave. A week later, a politician called Tom Bradley, who was the chairman of Kettering, called me and said, would you be interested in the manager's job? You know, I was almost there in 5 minutes. And he was talking to me. He said, you've come very, very highly from a friend of mine. I got the Kettering job on the back of Jack Dunnett, because even though Jack Dunnett asked me to stay at Notts County and Jimmy wanted me to stay, I couldn't morally do it because of Ron Fenton. And I thought, well, you know, I'll go and I'm sure I'll get a job somewhere. And then I got a phone call from Kettering chairman, a man called Tom Bradley, who was quite a top politician then. He was a big friend of Jack Dunnett's. And Jack said, I've had a phone call from a friend of mine. Would you want the Kettering job? My head said no. And I thought, he said, I suggest you speak to him. So I thought, okay. So I met the Tom Bradley in Kettering, and he couldn't stop telling me how much Jack Dunnett regarded me, and how Jack thought I was perfect for the job. And I got the job. Took over from Derek Dugan. And as you know, we did remarkably well, went to Wembley and the trophy and all that type of thing. But my mind always goes back to Jack Dunnett, because I turned Jack down. Now, he could have said, well, go and do what you want. But he took the time to ring Tom Bradley and say, this is from Tom Bradley, I think I've got your next manager. I think you should at least speak to him. And that's what happened. I went over and met Tom. We clicked immediately. We were on the same wavelength. And he said, Jack Dunnett speaks so highly of you. I think you're the right man for me. And I thought, I'm thinking, that's brilliant. Because I thought, I'm finished with Notts County. Jack doesn't need to do anything for me. For him to pick the phone up and ring Tom Bradley and say, I think I've got your next manager. And that's what happened. I became Kettering's next manager. That came from Tom Bradley. I'll never forget that, because, you know, for him to do that, he didn't have to pick the phone up. He didn't have to do anything for me. I was leaving the club. And it's something that's stuck with me all my life about Jack Dunnett, and about I'm not the best fan of politicians, Paul, coming from Sunderland, but he went so high in my estimation by actually getting me the job at Kettering, and it was the stepping stone for me.
Yeah, I was very pleased when I was writing my book. The first person I tried to arrange an interview with and managed to do it was with Jack, because at that time Jack was about 93.
Yes,
and clearly, you know, you want to be able to get a matter of record from him, but you know, you might not necessarily have a lot of time. And I met him at the Betcham Arms, St Pancras.
Yes.
And, you know, he turns up, 93, insisted on travelling across London to meet me. I shall have a Notts County jumper on. He got his old Magpie motif on. And he was brilliant. And he could remember anything and everything, you know. And it was quite interesting. The things he didn't want to tell me, he just kind of, I can't remember that. And there were certain questions I wanted to ask Jack. And one of them, and it ties back to your contract discussions, Tony Haitley, his son Mark. And Mark tells me that one of the reasons, I don't know whether you know this, one of the reasons Tony came back was, yes, there was a contract, but in those days there were kind of like brown envelope agreements as well. And according to Mark, Tony was on a crowd bonus. So whatever the crowd was, pick it up, let's say it was 6,000 or 7,000. If it went above that, Tony got a cut in his wage packet. And of course, as you know, when Tony arrived, Gates virtually doubled for his first 4 games.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so clearly Tony's done very well. And I remember sort of mentioning this in a roundabout way, and Jack just looked at me, oh no, that can't be right. No. And I believe in Don's book as well, Don alludes to the fact that there were some additional payments, shall we say, were forthcoming to him. But on that subject of that era, and certainly before Notts started winning the 4th Division Championship, wages were not good. And it's quite a fascinating story. There were several of you at Notts County because you didn't get a full wage, did you, in the summer? Your kind of wages dipped when you
Correct.
were. It's a bit like cricket was till a few years ago.
Yeah,
So you were on X, and then it would like halve or drop by 30% for the summer months.
Yeah.
And so you and several of the lads were down Snedden Market, weren't you?
That's right. Yeah. And that was a great experience for me because I was up at 4. Me, John Brindley, Les Brad, Stubbsy, probably others I can't remember, but they were the main. We were the main lads, and I actually worked for a Notts County supporter, season ticket holder, and all that, and to get the lads to work for him was a big thing, But I loved it. I loved the camaraderie. The daft thing is. And the worst thing is, I was making more money in the summer than I was in the football season, and that can't be right, can it? I'm all over the place. I'm getting up. I can see it now. I used to walk from Magpie Top to the open market. Well, not walk, run. I used to run on purpose.
Yeah, but it's downhill in the morning, isn't it? It's a bit of a bugger going back up, but it's downhill in the morning.
Yeah, but even so, I ran back home as well, and. I used to think that was great because this extra bit I was doing was for the next season where I'd be really fit. So I got that in my mind. But the open market trading and all that was what an education that was, And I remember, I wish I couldn't remember the guy's name, but I'm going out in the van delivering all this stuff to different mainly Carlton and around there. And then the strawberries came in, and he got us all together. He says, "Listen, lads," he said, "I'm telling you now, you will nick some strawberries off the van on the way around. I'm telling you now, because you'll not resist them." He says, "But I'll give you a week, and you will never eat another strawberry in your life." And sure enough, I'm going Magpie Top. And I see it like yesterday. I'm going on Magpie Top, and I've got all these strawberries, and I'm at the lights, and thinking, I'll have one. And by the time I got to Carlton, I've had about 6. And then after a week, I couldn't look at a strawberry. And he was right. He was right. But honestly, I've made more money there than I did playing for Notts County.
It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
For the younger generation, my son's age and younger, you are a professional footballer.
Yeah.
Professional footballer. And in the summer, you are getting up at 4 a.m. to work on Snedden Market.
Yeah.
Deliver fruit and veg.
Yeah. Around
the community. That will be unheard of in current society. Did you resent it? Obviously, you didn't resent it, but you just accepted that's what you do.
Well, it was Bill Brindley who got me the job, and Bill knew everybody in Nottingham. He knew all the, he knew all the villains. He knew all where the crooks were. Bill knew everybody, and it was Bill who said, "Listen, this will do us good. You're going to get more money in your hand at times, anyway, than you would do through your tax salary." But it was hard work. It wasn't easy, like I say. But I used to run top to the open market. I used to run every day, then run home, and that was to keep myself in good condition, And I try not to eat too many strawberries.
Okay.
Yeah. But when I look back, that this would never happen today, obviously, and good luck to the players. But when I look back, it still molds what you become. Those situations, I mean, John Brindley, bless him, he passed away in a sad loss. We were very, very close, me and Bill. And I used to go around his house and see Catherine, his wife, and the kids and all that. And we had some great times together. Me, him, Les Brad. That was like a little clique of players who had great fun. And Haley was Haley became a bit of a hero to me. And I used to go around his house and we'd make a cup of coffee. And I used to play in the back garden with his son Mark. Now Mark was a tiddler. And I mean a tiddler, you know, he was only up to his dad's waist. And he was running all over the place with the ball. And I used to join in and play. And then apparently Mark just said to his dad, can you bring Mick round? Because he said, you know, the lads are coming. Can you bring Mick? No, Mick will be here, don't worry. And then Tony would tell me that. So me and Mark would get on, you know, with the ball. And I'd have him heading the balls and springing and jumping and all this type of thing. And I think he was only a baby. I mean, I'm guessing 5-year-old or something like that, you know. And then he ends up at the very top, just like his dad, really. I loved Haley, honestly. I absolutely loved him. His enthusiasm for training. He never moaned. He never complained. Unless he wasn't, he'd say to Charlie Crickmore, just put the ball in the box. Don't worry where you put it. I'll get it. And Johnny Nixon, same thing. No, I can hear the arguments now between them. Just, Haley, put it in the box. Well, Don once said, don't worry about Don. Put it in the damn box and I'll finish it. And he did. Tony had Tony's enthusiasm for life. And well, you know, it's like everything. When you've been at a club and you come back at later stage and you've been at the top, Liverpool and all that, coming to Notts County for him you'd think must be, well, this is my way out now. His enthusiasm from day one for training, professional, it was amazing. And of course, we were all resentful when he signed Italy. I'll tell you that now. That's a fact, because we had this meeting among the players. And John Brindley in particular was upset about it because he knew Haley's probably going to get 3 times more than us. Yeah. And that's when I said, but Bill, you know, he's got to put money in our pockets, this lad. I didn't realise how good Haley was. You know, his attitude towards training. I would say he's a modern day then Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, obsessed by football, obsessed by fitness, loved football, Tony Haley, loved it. And he was limited, not in the air, of course. I mean, he was unbeatable in the air, but he was limited. And that used to annoy Don at times when he'd get the ball and wouldn't give it back to Don, try and turn and lose the ball. And some of the arguments between them two were not for supporters' ears. But Haley's enthusiasm. We all knew Haley was getting. Don resented Haley because he knew Haley was getting a lot more than everybody, including Don. But on the field, never shirked a thing. Haley loved training. He was stupid in training. He was like a girl, you know, running around and shouting and squealing and jumping. And it's up with him. Is he on summit? You know, and but that was Tony. His enthusiasm and zest for life was amazing. I'll never forget him. I'll never forget Italy. And he had a big influence on me. For whatever reason, he took to me, and he'd ask me, he'd get me crossing balls to him and all that type of thing, and you know, put his arm around me. He drove a big Mercedes and said, "Here, there's my key. Yeah, can you take care of this for a few days?" I said, "What do you want me to do with it?" He said, "Well, drive it around." And I'd be driving around in a Mercedes when Tony was, I don't know, whatever Tony was doing. You know, we had that camaraderie. I don't think that era, Paul. I can't remember. I've had a, by my standards and by my level of ability, I've had a great career, but I can't remember a better time as a player. Well, no, that's not true. I had a better time at Peterborough because I was respected more by Noel Cantwell, who made me a better player. But overall, the atmosphere in that Notts County dressing room then was something amazing. And you've got to give credit to Jimmy, because even though me and Jimmy were always seen cross swords, Jimmy knew by bringing Haley in, he talked about putting the cream on the cake. That's what Haley was. And he knew Masson would resent it, but Jimmy lived with that. You know, Jimmy actually used to chuckle at times about it. Masson and Haley couldn't get on because both of them couldn't be top dog.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. But if you meet Don now and you ask him about Tony, he'd probably say he'd probably reflect the same as me about Tony Haley.
In closing, you talked about Jimmy saying clubs kind of revert to type. Given we are now in the National League, I certainly hope that adage recalibrates our current position in the footballing hierarchy sooner rather than later. You've assistant managed across a whole variety of divisions. Does it surprise you that Notts are where they are? But I guess you know more than most just how difficult it is if you slip into this division. It is to get back up again. Yeah,
you'll be astounded by how many clubs I've played against in the Football League and now out of the league. People like Grimsby. Grimsby should never be out of the league. I remember the days of McMenemy being manager there, you know, and clubs like that, Chesterfield, you know, we had ding-dongs. I had some right battles with Kevin Randall, who became my big friend, and when he joined Notts, and all that type of thing. And I think it's quite sad when I see that caliber club playing non-league football, as I call it. And I've never really liked the fact that a Football League club who's a founder member of the Football League been allowed to go out. I think that's sad. But it's how the rules are now, and that's how it is. But if you think about it, Wrexham and all these clubs, it's hard to get back.
Yeah.
Because what happens is they actually become a non-league club. Yeah. And that's what happens. They go from being a status. Like I've had some great games against Wrexham when they were good side, top of the league. And now they're non-league and they can't get back yet. I know it's opened the door for some clubs, but those clubs are never as good as the ones who go out of the league. And some clubs who have gone out of the league, so sad, because the Football League was made for everybody. It's turned Football League full-time clubs into non-league clubs because they've got to adapt, particularly with finances. I'm a big friend of the chief exec at Chesterfield, and we keep in touch. And he said he thinks they will, if they don't get back this season, with Notts County, he said, bless him, he said it'll get harder. It'll get harder and harder the longer you're out of it. And I agree with that. I don't like this Football League thing where you suddenly become a non-league club. I don't like that. And it rubs me up the wrong way. I don't think just because you've had a bad season that you should go out of the Football League. You know, I think it's typical of selfishness because the people who stay up don't care about Notts County going down. They say they do, but they don't really, as long as it's not them. Notts County should never be. Notts County, I don't know how it's happened, why it's happened. I've never analysed it, but they should never, ever be a non-league club. You know, founder members of the Football League, the history of Notts County. I think it's outrageous that they've been allowed to be a non-league club.
It's one for you. And some of our fan base still hanker, at some point, because clearly Neil is going to get back in the Premier League with Middlesbrough. We've got Ian at Notts trying to get back into the Football League.
Yeah.
Do you? Because Neil sometimes makes emotional decisions. I remember Neil telling me about how after he got the sack at Notts, no one would give him a job, and he went to Torquay, didn't he, for about 12 games and kept them in the Football League. Mm-hmm. Do you think there is ever a set of circumstances in which Neil would entertain a final swan song at Notts? Or do you think that ship has a long, long since sailed?
I think the answer is no. No, that wouldn't happen. if like anybody in the 70s, you're daft if you're not thinking about retirement.
Yeah.
I know his wife would like him to retire, but that's been going on for 10 years now.
Yeah.
He still loves the game. He's still enthusiastic. But when you get to your 70s, like say Fergie, you lose a lot of things in your ability to manage. And I'm not saying mentally, I'm talking physically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the pressure that he's under, because I've watched it, is immense, because Middlesbrough expect a lot this season. And at a bad start, etc., etc., etc. When I went up and they won that particular game, he's won 3 on the trot, and they're on the edge of the playoffs now. I think they're a point away from it. He will enjoy all that, but the pressure is immense. And I think he's unique. There's not many Neil Warnocks, just by virtue of his age. There's not many Neil Warnocks around. And whatever, he's not everybody's favourite. We don't care about that. What you can't deny is what he's done in the game and how he's done it. Because he has brought a lot of pleasure and joy. And like Cardiff City, I used to go down to Cardiff and watch them before I was ill. And the Cardiff crowd were amazing. They loved him. Absolutely loved him. And I used to think, this is brilliant for Neil, this. But as time goes on, it goes wrong. And then the same people start to criticise, start to boo. And you think, there's something wrong here. There's something not right about the mentality of people in football. Because he was yesterday's hero. Well, what's wrong with today, But he's that wise, and he's that clever, and he's that good. He'll think, okay, say goodbye to you. What about him up there? Do you fancy giving me the job? Go in with a freshness and enthusiasm. I know for a fact that the chairman, Steve Gibson, who's a good man. He's a type of chairman we would remember. Runs the club on his own and pumps millions in. He and Neil have a great relationship. I've seen that before, but I've seen it more when I was up there a couple of weeks ago. The camaraderie on the training ground is excellent. His staff are good. Got people around him. He protects himself very well, Neil, and that's. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I'm going to do this. He values me being there 2 weeks ago, and he valued me at Notts County, always being around him without saying too much, but just keeping my own counsel, but seeing things that he should know about, that I tell him at the right time. We used to have journeys all over England, Scotland, looking for players. And you can imagine on these long journeys, the conversations we had. If it's with a tape recorder like a journalist like yourself, it's gold dust. It'd been gold dust.
Yes.
And he will miss that. But there are things in the modern game he won't miss. And his biggest problem is if he gets Middlesbrough up, he's not going to retire. They'll literally have to shoot him.
Yeah. And
because the challenge is back again.
Yeah.
And whilst that's always there inside of him, he's never gonna pack up.
Mick, we're nearly up to 2 hours. It's flown by. The most important thing I think from today's chat is how well you look. And we started this show off, didn't we? And I didn't know this, but you volunteered that you had 2 days to live. That was 2.5 years ago.
Yes,
you're looking pretty well on it. You're looking pretty well on it.
Yeah, I blame my consultant. I had a lovely conversation with Sol Bamba at Middlesbrough, and he's a good player. Yeah. He's the best.
Sol's had his own personal.
He's the best centre back in the division, and he's had exactly the same illness as me, but he's a lot younger, and that makes a big difference. And he said something similar to what you're saying. I said, well, if you lose your enthusiasm, it'll kill you. You can't lose your enthusiasm for life and what you do. particularly football. And I said, you've done remarkably well, because I think he's 31, 32. You've still got life left inside you as a footballer. But what you've recovered from is exactly the same as what I've got and what he's got. And he's never missed a game. And unless he gets injured, he won't miss a game. His enthusiasm in training, Paul, was something to watch. And I'm looking at him thinking, you know something, I'm the only one here who can relate to you, because we've both got lymphoma, and which was diagnosed as leukemia, but they decided whatever. The experts said no, it's lymphoma, but it's a borderline, and that's hence the 2 days to live. I can relate to Saul, and he can relate to me now. He's going to enjoy the best years of his life playing football now because of that illness, because it nearly took him. And it's like me, you know, this is a terrible thing to say, and maybe I shouldn't, but say this, but I'm going to say it. I don't like old people. I don't like people who bore me with illness, because when people get illness, they need to talk about it. They need to tell somebody about it. They want to talk about it. It gets on my nerves talking about it. And, you know, so with great respect to you, I'm not bothered about what anybody thinks about, you know, it's important for me and the people around me who I love to fight like hell to retain, first of all, my enthusiasm and my attitude towards the game I love, you know. And I went nearly 2 years without seeing a game of football live, which for me is, you know, criminal.
Yeah.
Now to be allowed, when I went to Peterborough last week, and I went and watched Middlesbrough play 2 weeks ago, and both clubs won. And because I've played at both, that feeling you can get from being a spectator, I understand how fans feel now, because I've only played the game, I've only coached the game. To be in their position when your team wins, it's everything to them, you know. It makes your Sundays great and all that type of thing. And I just feel I'm very lucky. There's somebody died recently, can't remember who it was, Paul, in his 50s. I thought 50s. I can't believe that. You know, that's when it's sad. You're getting like becoming an old codger like me. Nature tells me I'm getting closer to my grave every day, but I'm fighting like hell not to get there.
It's great that you're back on the circuit, Middlesbrough, Peterborough, and I'm probably not giving too much away. You will be getting a call from Leslie Brad very shortly.
Okay.
And so I think we're all looking forward to seeing you back down at Meadow Lane, a club that obviously is very, very close to your heart.
Yes, yeah. Well, so is the man you just mentioned, because he's always been great with me, Les. But I tell you what a good player. If Les had the ambition I had at the time, and I had Les's ability, you're talking about a Premiership player. Les was so laid back. He was incredible, but what a good player. Powerful man, pace, good in the air. It's two players, him and Kevin Randall. I used to say, I would like them all close to. And Brady, apart from all that, was everybody's mate in the dressing room. He's almost naive at times. You know, we like this bloke from Buxton, you know, way up in the hills and all that. You know, he didn't seem to be a towny type of lad. But I tell you what a good player. What a good, and his record tells you that. You know, you can't make the facts up, can you?
He's a record goal scorer, and I suspect, certainly in all of our lifetimes, that's never going to be beaten. That's never going to be 120.
I don't think so, Paul. I don't think so. And that's, you know, he wears number 9. That's what you do. If you don't score goals, you're not a number 9. But he scored goals, like Haley. But Les, oh, I can't find words to tell people how regarded Les is and was at Notts County. You know, he is a real club legend, Les Brad, no doubt about it. He's up there with Tommy Lawton, who actually, Tommy, when I broke my leg playing for Notts County, it was Tommy drove me to the hospital for my operation, and Tommy talked football. I'm lying in the back of Tommy's car because Mr. Jackson, the consultant who passed away, Peter Jackson was the club's honorary surgeon. And he said to me, right, this is a bad one. He said, we've got to get to hospital as fast as we can. And he said, now I'm going to ring. I need an assistant. I need an anaesthetist. I need a nurse and all that. He said, I'll organise that. He said, but we need to get you quick. Something to do with the blood flow. I don't know. And so Tommy Lawton actually took me in his car to Harlow Wood Hospital. I'll never forget this. And Tommy taught football to me all the way up, and then dropped me off. And then Peter Jackson was in the car, only 2 minutes behind me. I get to the hospital, rush me in, and then next thing I know, I'm lying on this bed, and Peter Jackson's all gowned up, and operated on my ankle, put it back in place and all that. And afterwards, he could have gone home, he didn't. When I came round, and it's compos mentis, he came and he said, how are you feeling, Mick? I said, I feel all right. He said, I'm telling you now, he said, that was as bad as I've ever dealt with. He said, but I promise you will play again. He says, I've done a cracking job. He said, I'm a cracking surgeon. And I thought, oh yeah. And he was right. But he did say later on in life, you're going to pay the price for this. And I do. It kills me at times. But it was, obviously like all things, if you've had a career in football, everything's worth it, isn't it? Yeah.
Mick, 2 hours, brilliant. Thank you ever so much.
You're welcome, Paul.
We look forward to seeing you back at Meadow Lane very shortly. Mick,
Brilliant.
Thank you very much indeed.